HTML is the standard markup language for web pages. With HTML, you can create your own website, and with HTML, it's pretty easy to learn, and you will enjoy it. Most people learn it pretty much enjoy it. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. HTML is the standard markup language for creating web pages. HTML describes the structure of a web page, consists of a series of elements, and these elements, they tell the browser how to display the content. The elements are basically labeled pieces of content, like this is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is a link, and so forth. So HTML elements will serve as the foundation of the web page. You can start an HTML page in any pretty much text editor. People use Sublime Text. You could probably do it in VS Code or something. I like to use Notepad++. So if you want, you can download Notepad++ to get started with writing HTML pages. So a typical HTML document starts with something like doc type HTML. And in order to kind of start highlighting syntax coloring, I do want to save it as HTML. So what you could do is, at least in Notepad++, you could rename the page, and you could also save as the page. And the save as type, I'm just going to look for the hypertext markup language. Which is right there. Okay, so HTML file. And thus the extension ends with .html. Okay. Next, I'm going to start writing some more tags. We can see some of the syntax highlighting starting to appear, like HTML started in blue, because I saved it as HTML document. Okay. Think about a web page as basically a document, as if you are writing an essay. So if you were told to write an essay, you would open up something like a text editor, like Microsoft Word, and then you would start with some introduction, like long time ago in 1875, the first invention, blah blah blah. Okay, so you would start writing an introduction, right? And according to MLA format, then you'd indent the first sentence and you would continue writing, right? That would be like your introduction, for example, and then you would get into a body paragraph where you start writing another body paragraph. And usually it's about three body paragraphs, and eventually you end with a conclusion. Okay, so this is conclusion and so forth. Okay, so normally this is how paper writing or essay writing would look like, right? And a web page is very similar to this. You have some sort of like introduction, like a header. You have some sort of body in there using the body tag, and you have some sort of like conclusion, sometimes like a footer to the page. Okay, and if you look at the structure, you can think of it like a tree. Okay, so you start with a tree, which is basically the page, the text that you see, the document, and then within the tree you have different branches, and within the branches, which signify like elements, and the tags, within the branches you can have leaves, and the leaves are essentially the content that people and your users. So you always start out with a tag like this, just like in C++, for example, how you start with the directives like $, include iOS stream for the input and output library. Otherwise, your program will not have input and output. Similarly, in HTML, this is kind of what you start out with when writing an HTML document. Okay. And then next, you start with the HTML tag. And with all the elements in HTML, they kind of follow XML rules. And you start the tag with whatever the tag is called, and then you end it with a slash, and then HTML, the name of that tag. And you'll see it kind of like matches, basically. Okay, so if I highlight this, it matches it to the ending HTML tag. Okay, and that's how you start and end tags in HTML. Sometimes if you don't end tags, it's fine, like the page will probably still run. But once we get to things like tables and stuff, you'll see why it's important to close tags, because it could probably overlap other tags that you have. And it's always a good practice to close the tags, even if it doesn't give you an error. Okay. So after we defined our starting tags here, then next up, I'm going to put another tag called head. Okay, so you can think of this kind of like the introduction to your document, and then end that tag. And within the head, you could have stuff like the title of the page. Okay, so if you go on something like Chrome, okay, usually you have here a tab, and the tab usually has a name. So you could have stuff like that. Okay, so you can have a title. Now, no, some of the tags are optional, but obviously they can have importance to the user who's looking at the page, because if you have like different tabs, it might be ideal to include something like a title to the tab so that they don't lose track of where they are. Okay. So after I've done my intro or the head, next up what I could do is the body paragraphs, right? Or the body of the document. Then I end body, and then ending tag. And next up, from here, we get into even more tags. There's like a zillion of tags out there for HTML, like hundreds of them. So we're going to use a couple common ones like H1. So H1 basically means like a header. Again, going back to a Microsoft document, if you see here these things, okay, so you have like no spaces, you have heading, heading 2, a title, subtitle, all that. So you have like these kind of headers or headings that you could use. Similarly, these headings are exactly that in HTML. Okay, so I'm just saying like heading 1, which will give me some sort of like bolding. So if I made this like heading 1, it gives me this size and this like 16 and Calibri light. Okay, so if I do heading 2 for this one, then it gives me slightly a different size. So you have like a smaller size 13 with Calibri light. So similarly, the HTML heading 1 tag works the same way. Okay, so if you want to bold a certain starter to your page and then you want to do like a sub heading and so forth, this is how you can do it. Okay, so we're going to use heading 1 or H1. Okay, and I'm going to say something like my first heading, and then that with an H1 tag. And just like I explained in a normal essay, you would have, or a paper, you'd have body paragraphs. Okay, so P for paragraph. Okay, and I'm going to say something like my first paragraph. Okay, so we already entered the body and HTML. So now that we have written a very simple page here, how do we actually run it? Okay, so first you need to save your page, and I already saved it as .html. You can also see that the file has been defaulted to your default browser. In my case, it's Google Chrome. So I could also open it from here. And there we go. This is the page here. Okay. Normally, I would expect to see an option in Notepad++ here with the different browsers, but this is a new version of Notepad++, so I probably need to do something to get it there. Nonetheless, I could also run it from here, from wherever it's saved. Okay, so I saved it under Website Basics folder that I created, and you could also open it with the different browsers here. Okay, so that's how you can run your web page. And we can see this is the first heading. Okay, and you can see with the title, the page title, this is what we have for the tab name at the top, page title. So this is how you can name your tabs. And this is our first paragraph. Okay, so that's how you can write a web page and start out with a web page. So this doc type HTML, this is a declaration that defines this document as an HTML5 document. The HTML tag here is the root element of an HTML page. The head element contains meta information, so information that can change about the HTML page. And the title is, as I mentioned, it's something you can specify to the tab. It specifies the title for the HTML page. And the body is the element that defines the document's body. And H1 is just an element for enlarging a heading. And the P is the element that defines the paragraph. Okay, and the paragraph is usually where you can write like a lot of the stuff you want to write. Okay, That's where you write the bulk of your page. So all HTML elements can have attributes, and the attributes, they provide additional information about elements. These attributes are always specified in the start tag, and the attributes usually come in name value pairs, like name equals value, okay? So the first attribute we're going to use is something called href. And what you could normally do is with href is you could reference a specific URL of the page, so it can direct you to another page, and that's how you can go from one page to the next. So if you're writing your first project, if you're creating 2 different web pages, you could reference your other page using the href link. Okay. So in order to do that, we're going to use something called the a tag. Okay, so I'm going to say a again, end it with a. So this is an anchor, and actually for this a tag, before I close it and put something, you would normally expect to write something in between the greater than sign and less than sign, but with the attributes, it's a little different. Okay, you actually write stuff within the starter tag. Okay, so I'm going to say href equals let's say HTTPS www.google.com. And here I'm going to say visit Google. Okay. So I'm going to save the page. And I could reopen the page, or I could just refresh the page. And the effect, it should take the effect there. So you can see I added the anchor, and now it's there. And if I highlight over it, it actually opens up a Google page as I instructed it to. So this is how you can reference other pages here using the href link. Okay. We could also use img tag for to embed images in an HTML page. And along that, we can use the source attribute to specify the path of the image. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go download an image. So if you move it to the folder, you don't have to specify a path. It will automatically know where it is. Okay, so we named it bleach.jpg. And I'm going to save it. So now if I reload the site, there we go. So I have my image there. You can have a URL as well. Okay. And in this case, this is a relative URL. So I downloaded the image and I put it inside my folder. And so this is known as a relative URL. An absolute URL would be something like this. Okay. And a relative URL would be something like this. Okay. So this links to an image that's hosted within the site. And the URL does not include the domain name. If the URL begins without dash, it will be relative to the current page. Okay. If the URL begins with a slash, it will be relative to the domain. Okay. Normally, you could do something like this to specify the current directory. Okay, so this will or should also give the same results. And as you can see, I refreshed the page and it gave the same results. You might have to do this for your projects, the / to specify the current directory, depending on how AWS behaves. So if you are facing issues like with images not embedding or uploading, this could be one of the tricks you could use, the / So this indicates current directory. It's almost always best to use relative URLs, like the ones, like in this case, as they will not break if you change the domain. Okay. So this normally just signifies the current directory, and it's normally best to use it so that if you change the location of the image somewhere, or I don't know, move somewhere else, like you move the page into a different directory, the image can still be intact and not change. We could also define width and height attributes for the image. So we can have, for example, width. So this is another attribute. And think of these attributes just like adjectives in an English sentence. So here I'm telling that this image should be a certain size. Okay. And for now, we are specifying these attributes within the HTML document. But once we get to CSS, you can define these attributes outside the HTML document and reference them here. So once we get to CSS, we'll cover that and how you can do that. Okay, and the reason why you should do that. But for now, because we're writing a very simple web page, I'm just going to write the attributes in here. Okay, and let's see what happens. You can see that the size of the image changed with these attributes I added. Okay. You could also add an alt attribute. Like let's say your image is broken and does not show. It's always a good idea to add an alternative title to your image. So what we could do is we could say alt equals no, bleach image with Ichigo, something like that. If I go here, okay. Because the image is not broken, then it would not show in this case. But if it was broken, then the alternative title would be for that image, bleach image with Ichigo. So the user would be expecting like an image was there that has to do with bleach and Ichigo. Okay, so let's actually try it out. Okay, and you can see that the alternative, because the image no longer exists in the folder, I deleted it. You can see that the alternative was displayed. And now that I brought it back, if I reload the page, I should bring it back. We could also use the style attribute. And this is, for the most part, what will define your CSS writings when you get to CSS. So we could have, let's say, another paragraph here. Okay, so I'm going to say style equals color red. And that paragraph. So even though we already defined a paragraph here, we could define more paragraphs as we want to. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with duplicate tags or something like that. We could use another h1 tag if we want to, another anchor, etc. Okay. So I can say this is another paragraph. Actually, because we are writing it in red, so let's say this is a red paragraph. Okay. Save a page. And at the bottom here, you can see another paragraph was added. This is a red paragraph. Okay, so this is how you can add style directly in the tag in the element. So I'm going to say like lang equals en US for the country code. Okay. Now there shouldn't be any drastic changes to the page. This is just like for search engines. So if you are searching for websites in the United States, you often get pages are in English. So even though there was a title element here, we could also have a title attribute to define some extra information about an element. Okay, the value of the title attribute will be displayed as a tooltip when you mouse over the element. So often wonder how some pages where you hover over certain elements of the page, it kind of gives like a small text or a tip about what that is. You could do that as well using the title attribute. Okay, so I'm going to define another paragraph here. And within this, I'm going to have the title attribute equals. I can say this is a tooltip. Okay, this is a paragraph. So if I refresh the page and I hover over it, you can see that this is a tooltip that can show. Okay? This is how you can kind of give these kind of tips to your pages. It's good for accessibility purposes. So the standard HTML does not require lowercase attribute names. The title attribute and all other attributes can be written with uppercase or lowercase, like title or titled. Okay, so if I set here title, okay, you can see that the syntax highlighting did the same thing. And if I save the page and reload it, it should still give me the same results. I still get the tip. Okay, so lowercase and uppercase doesn't matter with attributes. Okay. However, what's recommended is you use lowercase attributes in HTML because lowercase attributes demand stricter document types, things like XHTML, okay, which is extensible HTML. So it's just a recommendation to use lowercase. Otherwise, you could use uppercase. It's also always suggested to code your attribute values. So the standard does not require codes around attribute values, but that is recommended as well because it demands codes for stricter document types, again, like XHTML or extensible HTML. Okay, so what I'm talking about is, for example, this here. Actually, let's do it with one where we don't have too much going on. So with the href attribute, if I remove the double quotes here, okay. Okay, you can see that it still works. Okay, but obviously the recommendation is you should always have double quotes. Okay, and it helps you with a kind of syntax highlighting. You would know that this belongs to the href attribute in that case. Sometimes you do have to use quotes regardless. So for example, I define a paragraph here. If I say title equals about course, course. Okay, it just gives you about. So in other words, the rest of the stuff that you wrote is ignored. Okay, so this is why it's always a good idea to have double quotes around your attributes or attribute values, I should say. There we go. So about this course. Double quotes around attribute values are usually the most common in HTML, but single quotes can also be used. In some situations, when the attribute value itself contains double quotes, it's necessary to use single quotes actually. So for instance, so I have like a title equals Nelson, okay, versus this one. Title. Okay, so in this case, what I did is I put the single quotes around the entire value and then double quotes inside in the first one, and then I flipped them with the second one here. One. John Rifle Nelson and John Rifle Nelson. You can go all the way from H1 all the way to H6. Okay, so if I say H2, heading 2 enclosure, so heading 2, heading 3, okay, all the way up to heading 6. I refresh the page, we should note some differences between the different headings. So I can see heading 2, heading 3, and heading 6 being like the smallest. So headings are important because search engines use headings to index the structure and the content of your web pages. Users, they often skim a page by its headings, and it's important to use headings to show your document structure. So H1 headings should be used for main headings, followed by H2 headings, then the less important H3, and so on. Try to use HTML headings for headings only. Like, don't try to use like a workaround with them to make text big or bold. And primarily, they should be for the purpose, which is headings. Okay. If you want to bold certain text and stuff, you could use a bolding element. Each HTML heading has a default size, as you've seen, but we can also specify the size for any heading with a style attribute. And we could use a CSS font size property. So, for example, let's say for heading 6, I could define style equals font size. And I want to give it, usually the sizes are normally in the metric called pixels, saying 60 pixels or 60 px. And let's see what happens with that. So currently it's like this, it's a small. So let's see how that changes. Oh, there we go. We just made it bigger. With the paragraphs, we've seen that they always start on new lines. We didn't have to actually like say new line or something. And we cannot be sure how HTML will be displayed exactly. So large or small screens and resized windows will create different results. Okay, so on my screen right now, okay, things look like this here. But if a page was resized, like this type of resizing, okay. So normally screens can be like this small if you're looking at on your mobile phone. If you're looking at a different screen that's larger, that usually matters a lot, and that gets into the topic of responsive design. How can you make your application responsive to different devices? Okay, and normally students in the projects they would use an external library called like Bootstrap. Responsive design is always something that you want to note when creating a website. Okay. For different device sizes. The browser will automatically remove any extra spaces and lines when the page is displayed. For example, if we have our paragraph here, let me actually define another paragraph. This is paragraph, and it doesn't have to be all in one line, so I can put my ending tag somewhere else, and I could write in between, and all this content will be in between, will be considered a paragraph because it's in between the starting and ending tag. Okay, so you could write anything you want here. Okay. And I'm going to define another paragraph. Normally the indentations here doesn't matter too much, but it's always good to envision your document as a tree, as I told you. So try to have your tags kind of indented, with kind of the root being at the very first margin, and then try to use tab to indent the second most important heading or tag, and then the third most important tag, and so forth. Okay, so this is why you'll see me kind of indenting my tags. Right. So in this case, I was trying to show like different spaces. Let's say like I have this much space, this much space. Okay, so let's see what happens. First page. And you'll notice that for both paragraphs, they look identical pretty much. Or the spaces here that we have were ignored. Okay. And for that, you will need to use a different tag or a different attribute in order to use like the spacing that you want. So I'm adding this property, the CSS property, to define background color for the body HTML element. So say something like powder blue. Now I know this color off the top of my head, but there's like tons of colors out there. So you could look for like background color colors, and you can find like different colors out there. Obviously, the like basic ones, red, green, etc. It's things you could guess, but you might want to go for a distinct color for your web page. So you might have to do like some digging around online to find what colors you could use. Okay, what colors are actual like values for this property. So I'm going to save this and let's see what happens to the page. There you go. So I changed it to this color that I specified here, powder blue. Okay, so this is how you can color your page. But let's say you don't want to color the page. Let's say that you want to only color specific headings. Okay, so we could actually do that as well. I'm going to add it to H1 heading. Okay, and let's see what happens. Only the first heading here was colored. Okay, so this is how you can apply to different or specific sections in your page. Okay, so I could add another one. Maybe for this one, put this heading 2 here, and I can say I want the color to be tomato. This is an actual value. There we go. So heading 2 is now tomato. So now let's get into text formatting. So let's say you want to bold your text, but you don't want to use the heading to do that, right? So we kind of recommended against that. So what you could do is you could use the B element to format for bold text, the strong element for highlighting important text, the I element for italic text, if you want to italicize your text, EM for emphasized text, mark for marked text, small for smaller text, DEL or del for deleted text, so strike through, INS for inserted text, sub for subscript text, and SUP or sub for superscript text, like if you want to do exponents. Okay. Say I want to bold this paragraph here. Okay. So I can just, after the P element, I could add B and also end B. Now, if I look at the page, so it's currently just standard text, no bolding. If I refresh, now it's bolded. So that's how you can bold your paragraph. Now, let's say I applied another tag, and this one I'm going to say strong. Okay. Actually, let me do it to the second paragraph so we can note actual difference. Strong. Okay, so it gives pretty much the same effect, but it cannot emphasize the importance of it. The content is typically displayed in bold. So again, this kind of conforms back to the styles here. You have bold, italicize, underline, subscript, and superscript, the strike through. Okay, and like all these different styles that you normally find in a Microsoft Word document or a Word document, there's likely a tag for it in HTML. Okay, so for example, if I want to italicize here, I could add another element. So you don't have to use strong with it, but you could add as many tags as you want. Okay, so I, and then we should notice that it gets italicized. There we go. So now it's italicized. Let's see what happens if we add EM tag. So I'm actually gonna replace strong with EM. It will remain italicized. Okay. A screen reader with EM will be able to pronounce the words in EM with an emphasis using verbal stress. Okay, so this could be helpful for accessibility purposes. You could also use small to define smaller text. Small, small. So let's see what happens to that paragraph there, my first paragraph. Okay, so it got a little bit smaller. Okay, it kind of basically conforms to this style right here, decrease the font size. We can also use the mark element to define text that should be marked or highlighted. Okay, so we could do stuff like this using the mark tag. So let's say here, say mark. Mark. And it got highlighted. Well, it doesn't have to be all of it. So I could, if I want to, I could have text before this and text after it. And then it would highlight just that specific section of your text. Okay, there we go. Let's use a strike attribute. Let's say I want to strike this here. Okay, so strike. Strike. And it struck this part of the sentence. Again, that kind of conforms to this right here, strike through. You could also do that with DEL. So if I change that to DEL, DEL, okay, it pretty much gives the same result. So you'll notice that you could do, using like certain tags, you could do the same thing with another tag, okay? We could use the sub one. Let me define another paragraph. So P. Okay, now I'm gonna use maybe in the middle of the word, sub. So let's see what happens with this one. So you'll see here that it's up a part of the word. Okay, and we could also do likewise with a superscript. So SUP. So this would be helpful if you want to write exponents, or if you're writing something like first. Okay, let's say 1 st. And second. SUP. SUP. So there we go. If you want to write something like first and second, you could use the SUP element to do a superscript, which again conforms to something like this one. Superscript. Now let's say you want to define a section that is coded from another source. Usually in essays, they tell you make sure to include your references and your sources. So let's say you want to do something like that. Okay, so Here is a code from Google, okay, for example. Block code. And then use the site attribute and reference the site that you want to reference. Okay, so say Google. Or 50 something, something, something. Okay, you can add that block code. So let's see how that looks like. Okay. So here's a code for Google, and it kind of block codes it for you. You could also use the Q for short quotations. So, for instance, B, something, something, Q. Quotation. Yeah. Okay, so there kind of codes it. You could also do abbreviations. Using the ABB R tag, and that's helpful for synonyms. Okay, so like P, ABBR, title. So let's say I want to abbreviate the World Health Organization. Okay, so World Health Org. And I want to abbreviate it as WHO. Then the tag was founded in 1948. Let's see how that looks like. There you go. So that's how you can abbreviate words. And if someone highlights over it, the title gives us the tooltip. Obviously, there's addresses that users could have. So you could use an address tag. So address. Written by John Doe. And you can use the BR for a new line. So I can say visit must at BR example.com BR. So BR is break line. So that's how you can insert new lines. For Disneyland break line. Interesting. Let's see how that looks like on the page. Okay, there we go. So I kind of stylized it as an address. You can use a tag called BDO, which stands for bidirectional override. And the bidirectional override tag is used to override the current text direction. So for example, BDO, DIR, RTL for right to left. This text will be written from right to left. So there we go. This text will be written from right to left. Okay. Comments. So in programming, obviously comments are really important to include. So if someone is looking at your code, they understand right away what's going on. And the way to write comments in HTML. So for example, if I want to write comments here, what you do is you open up with tag like usual, and then you use exclamation mark at the beginning, dash dash, and you can see because I haven't enclosed it yet, everything below that becomes commented out. And in this case, it's greened. Okay, so it's greened out. Okay, so from here, I could this is header 2. Okay, then just end that specifically there. So this comment is ignored by HTML, and it's only for you, the programmer, to kind of know what's going on at that line. So comments are not displayed by the browser, but they can help to document your HTML source code. You could also wrap contents or comments around existing tags. So for instance, let's say I want to wrap it around here. Okay, I don't have to like end it directly on the same line. I could have this anywhere. So you could write whatever inside. Kind of serves as a multi-line comment. Okay, you see that heading 3 will disappear because it's now a comment. So currently it's right here, and now that we commented it out, it's no longer there because now it's a comment. So comments are great for debugging HTML because you can comment out HTML lines one at a time to search for errors. You could also use inline comments. So for example, if I have a paragraph here, this is a paragraph. Like great text, okay, something like that. So it can have inline comments, and it's not to the detriment of whatever you're writing. So this is a paragraph. It completely ignored the comments, but you can have inline comments if you need to. We talked about the background color, but you could also do another style for color for things like H1, the P tag. So for instance, if I want to do it here, I can do style equals, we did background color. So background color basically does the entire background for the tag. But let's say you just want to color the text itself a different color. You don't want an entire background color. Okay, so in this case, we could do style equals, and I could just use the color attribute, and I can say like Dodger blue. Okay. And then if I refresh page, there we go. So this is how you can specifically color certain text the way you want to. You can also set color for borders. Okay, so for instance, I have heading 1. Could do a style here, style equals, and I can use the border attribute, border. And again, I can use 2 pixels. So the px for pixels. And I can say like solid tomato. This is solid tomato text border. So there you go. So you can kind of wrap border with color around your text. You could also have HTML, CSS, and for now we'll discuss internal CSS to HTML. So an internal CSS is used to define a style for a single HTML page. And the internal CSS is defined in the head section of an HTML page within a style element. So after your head here, you can include the style. And I can say I want my body paragraphs to all have a background color of powder blue. And I want, let's say, H1 elements to have a color of blue. And I want all paragraphs to have a color of red. So let's see what happens. There we go. Okay, and we can see that some of the headers, they have color red. Well, most of them. And that's how you can kind of define, you can set styles for all elements